No one expected a routine Wednesday practice to detonate an entire quarterback hierarchy, but the shift was obvious the moment players stepped onto the grass. There was a different kind of tension hanging in the air, subtle enough that you couldn't point to it, but heavy enough that everyone felt it. And before the first rep even started, coaches were exchanging quiet glances like they already sensed something was about to break open. What they didn't realize was that this session would stop being a competition and turn into a revelation. Everything started normally. Install period. 7-on-7. The drill every quarterback knows by heart. It's controlled, structured, predictable, exactly the kind of environment where both passers should look comfortable. But the opening reps immediately shattered the illusion of balance that the organization had spent weeks trying to maintain. What unfolded wasn't two young quarterbacks testing themselves. It was a live demonstration of separation, the kind of split that stops being about development and becomes about destiny. When Shedeur Sanders trotted in for his first sequence, nothing felt forced. There was no tension in his shoulders, no hesitation in his eyes. It was the body language of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done and wasn't afraid to show it. The moment the ball left his hand on the first throw, the entire mood shifted. It wasn't anything dramatic or flashy, just a perfectly timed completion that hit the receiver in stride and forced even the most hardened staffer to lean forward. Sanders wasn't testing the offense, he was running it. Then came the contrast. When Dillon Gabriel stepped into his reps, the calm evaporated. His body seemed tight, his timing off by half a beat, his decisions arriving just a fraction late. You could almost feel the urgency pouring out of him, like he understood this wasn't just another practice. Every throw carried a hint of desperation, and the more he tried to settle in, the more unsettled he looked. It wasn't a meltdown yet, but the cracks were visible. Observers later said it felt like watching two different levels of football happening on one field. Sanders' rhythm grew stronger with every snap. Gabriel's confidence thinned. And when teammates sensed that imbalance, they reacted instantly, not with cheers or theatrics, but with silent acknowledgement. The kind where players subtly shift their focus toward the quarterback who's actually making things work. That's when the atmosphere changed entirely. The chatter died down. Coaches stopped rotating between drills and started watching the quarterbacks directly. Veterans stood with folded arms, quietly evaluating. Younger players whispered to each other between reps. It was no longer about which quarterback could perform better. It was about which one made the offense feel alive. If you're enjoying this video and loving the content, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. It really helps us know what you want to see more of. And why keep all the excitement to yourself? Share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who loves NFL drama. By the time the first team period wrapped, no one was calling it a competition anymore. The separation was too obvious. The momentum had tilted so sharply that people stopped pretending this was still an even fight. The only question left was how long the organization could ignore what every set of eyes had witnessed. And what happened next? That's where the real explosion began. When training camp opened, the quarterback competition was supposed to be routine, a formality, almost theatrical. Coaches said all the right things publicly. Every job is earned. We're evaluating every rep. Nothing is guaranteed. But behind the scenes, everyone knew how this script was supposed to go. Veteran leadership wins early. Flashy rookies wait their turn. And the team moves smoothly into week 1 without the slightest ripple of controversy. Except this competition didn't read the script. The moment Shedeur Sanders walked onto the practice field, the quiet undertones of the quarterback room shifted. Not because he was perfect, rookies never are, but because he carried himself like someone who didn't understand the unwritten rule, you're supposed to wait your turn. He attacked every rep with urgency. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to prove he belonged right now. The veteran, Gabriel, had always been the steady hand, the guy coaches trusted. But Sanders brought the spark fans didn't even know they were missing. What started as a casual rotation of reps quickly became something else entirely. The throws grew sharper. The body language grew louder. Coaches who expected routine evaluation found themselves watching every snap with genuine curiosity. The media, sensing the tension but not bold enough to call it outright, began whispering, "Is this actually a battle?" The locker room, which usually stays neutral in these things, started to pick sides. Not publicly. But you could see it in how players gravitated after drills. Some leaned toward familiarity and leadership. Others leaned toward upside and electricity. The competition wasn't supposed to reach this point. It wasn't designed to be a coin flip. It was supposed to be a structured handoff, slow and controlled. But every day Shedeur kept pushing harder, refusing to give ground. The offense responded. Explosive plays increased. Red zone efficiency shifted. The ball simply moved differently when he threw it. Even players who believed the veteran should start began admitting, quietly, cautiously, that something was happening. Then came the day that blew the whole thing wide open. A joint scrimmage where the stakes weren't real, but the reactions were. Sanders took the field and delivered a performance so undeniable that the coaching staff couldn't downplay it anymore. He extended plays with pocket feel beyond his years. He hit windows that shouldn't have existed. He energized an offense that had looked flat the day before. Fans in attendance felt it. The opposing defense felt it. His own team felt it. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a safe, predictable preseason plan turned into a storm of expectations. Gabriel didn't collapse under pressure. He played well, even admirably. But sometimes solid can't keep up with special. And every time Sanders made another improbable throw, the pressure on the coaching staff grew. The narrative had shifted. The decision was no longer about protecting a rookie. It was about choosing the future or clinging to the familiar. The competition, that wasn't supposed to become anything, had become everything. And it wasn't done changing the team's trajectory yet. There are moments in a franchise's history that don't feel monumental in real time. They're quiet, subtle. They look like any other snap, any other play, any other substitution. But afterward, hours later, days later, people look back and say, that was it. That was when everything changed. For this team, that moment came the instant Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic. The coaches framed it as routine. We're just getting him some reps. It's part of his development plan. There's no quarterback controversy. Yet the way players straightened up on the sideline, the way fans leaned forward, the way defensive coaches across the field tightened their posture, it told a different story. Everyone could sense it. This wasn't just another rookie audition. This was a temperature check on the future. Sanders jogged out with a calmness that didn't match the tension surrounding him. He didn't look rattled. He didn't look excited. He just looked ready. As if this wasn't the first time he had been thrown into a proving ground moment. As if he had been preparing for this exact opportunity his entire life. The huddle closed around him and something subtle shifted, the cadence, the posture, the energy. Teammates later said they felt a spark. Not rah-rah hype, something steadier, more intentional. The first play wasn't spectacular, but it was revealing. A simple timing route, a quick read, a ball released with confidence and anticipation. It hit the receiver in stride. Chain moved. Sideline murmured. The offense jogged back without theatrics, but the message was received. Sanders was not overwhelmed. What came next, though, changed the tone entirely. On the third snap of the drive, the pocket collapsed early. Protection broke, a linebacker shot the gap, and it looked like the kind of doomed play rookies usually fold under. But Sanders didn't panic. He slid, reset, and delivered a dart between two defenders 20 yards downfield. It wasn't supposed to be possible. It wasn't supposed to be the kind of throw a rookie makes in that situation. But he made it. And the crowd, quiet a moment earlier, exploded. The coaches exchanged glances. Not excitement, not even approval. It was concern. The type of concern that comes when a plan is no longer in your control. From that moment on, the entire tone of practice changed. Receivers ran sharper routes. Linemen blocked a little longer. The defense disguised looks, trying to confuse him, trying to remind him he was still a rookie. But he didn't waver. He countered, adapted, adjusted. With every successful read and every precise throw, the conversation was shifting from give him reps to how do we keep him off the field? And when the drive ended, capped by a perfectly placed touchdown fade that dropped like it was guided by wire, there was no denying it. Sanders hadn't just taken the field. He had taken control of the narrative. He didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He just walked calmly off the field, helmet in hand, as if he hadn't just shaken the quarterback room to its core. Because the truth was clear now. This wasn't a developmental moment. It was an awakening. Every quarterback battle has a turning point, a moment where the momentum stops being theoretical and becomes visible. You can feel it in the air before you see it on the field. And for Gabriel, that shift came faster than anyone expected. One day he was the unquestioned starter, the veteran presence, the steady hand the coaching staff trusted. The next, he was fighting not only for the job, but for the belief that he still belonged. His collapse didn't happen in a single play. It unfolded in slow motion, like a structure cracking from within long before it collapses outward. From the moment Shedeur Sanders ignited the practice field, the environment around Gabriel changed. Teammates brought more intensity to the rookie's reps. More eyes followed Sanders' every throw. The buzz grew louder. And while no one said it outright, Gabriel could feel the room drifting, not maliciously, but inevitably, toward the rising star. Pressure shifts things, and pressure rewrote Gabriel's mechanics in real time. The first signs were subtle: a late step on a 5-step drop, a hesitation on a slant he normally fired without thinking, a checkdown thrown one beat early, not out of strategy but out of avoidance. These weren't mistakes rooted in lack of talent. They were symptoms of something deeper, a tightening grip, a fear of the moment instead of ownership of it. Then came the practice that broke open the truth. In a full team scrimmage, Gabriel opened with a routine drive scripted for rhythm. But rhythm never arrived. His first pass skipped at the receiver's feet. The second was nearly intercepted on a throw he telegraphed. On the third, sensing pressure that wasn't actually there, he bylaid early from a clean pocket, only to run straight into a defender who wasn't even rushing full speed. Coaches didn't shout. That was the most telling part. They watched with a quiet concern, typically reserved for situations you can't fix with a pep talk. Meanwhile, the defense sensed it. Defensive players, competitive by nature, began tightening windows and jumping routes, not just to make plays, but because they smelled uncertainty. And when a quarterback begins playing against both the defense and his own doubt, he's already lost the rep. The lowest point came midway through practice, a simple red zone drill. Gabriel misread the coverage, stared down the tight end, and threw a ball that was intercepted so easily the defender almost seemed surprised. When Gabriel walked back to the huddle, his shoulders didn't slump, but his eyes told the truth. He wasn't just frustrated, he was shaken.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button.
The coaches rotated Sanders in immediately after, officially calling it rep balancing. But everyone on the field knew the real reason. They needed to reset the energy. And when Sanders led a flawless scoring drive moments later, the contrast was too sharp to ignore. Gabriel was watching his command of the team evaporate in real time. This wasn't a meltdown filled with shouting or explosive mistakes. It was something quieter and therefore more painful, a veteran unraveling under the weight of a rising star, realizing the job he once owned now felt miles out of reach. By the end, the competition no longer felt like a competition. It felt like an ending. Every quarterback battle carries its share of heated moments, but what unfolded on the Browns' practice sideline that afternoon wasn't routine competitiveness. It wasn't two players fighting for a job. It was the moment where all the quiet tension, all the internal pressure, all the unspoken hierarchy changes finally boiled over in front of an entire organization. And it came so suddenly, so sharply, that practice nearly shut down on the spot. The trigger wasn't a single throw. It was the atmosphere, shifting, unmistakable, and impossible for Gabriel to ignore. As Sanders continued stacking highlight moments, teammates naturally gravitated toward him. Receivers lingered near him between reps, asking about timing and concepts. Running backs listened attentively when he spoke. Even offensive linemen positioned themselves closer to where Sanders stood, subtly signaling where they believed the offense functioned best. You could feel it. Gabriel could feel it most. For days, he had watched Sanders gain momentum. But today, the momentum turned into gravity, pulling the team toward the rookie, leaving the veteran stranded on an unfamiliar island. Every eye that had once looked to Gabriel now shifted elsewhere. Every bit of energy that once fueled him now fueled Sanders. And when Gabriel stepped off the field after another stalled series, the emotional weight finally cracked something inside him. The moment unfolded quietly at first. Gabriel approached Sanders not with hostility, but with a frustration he could no longer contain. He spoke sharply, too sharply for the cameras roaming nearby. Teammates turned their heads almost immediately. The tone didn't match the environment. It cut through it. Sanders didn't back away, but he didn't escalate either. According to multiple witnesses, he simply pointed toward the field, toward the reps, toward the results, as if to say, without saying a word, "This is the job. The job decides, not either of us." That silent response sparked everything. Gabriel took it as dismissal. Teammates read it as dominance. And in an instant, the sideline tightened. Several receivers moved in behind Sanders unconsciously, a protective instinct more than a choice. Linemen shifted subtly closer. Defensive players edged toward the confrontation not to intervene, but because they sensed something meaningful was happening. The tension became electric, sharp, heavy, and dangerous. A staffer rushed in first, trying to diffuse the interaction with hurried hand gestures. Then a quarterback's coach stepped between them. Then 2 more assistants arrived. The urgency was unmistakable. They weren't managing a disagreement. They were preventing a public rupture, one that could undermine the entire quarterback room. For nearly 30 seconds, practice paused. Players watched. Coaches whispered. No one breathed too loudly. It was the type of moment organizations pray never makes it to camera footage. Because the truth was obvious, Gabriel wasn't angry at Sanders. He was angry at the reality Sanders had created. A reality where the rookie wasn't just competing, he was winning. Where the team wasn't just supporting Sanders, they were choosing him. Eventually, the coaches steered both players apart, redirecting the drill and ordering a fast transition to the next period. But the moment hung in the air long after. Everyone knew something irreversible had just happened. Not a fight. Not a meltdown. A shift. The exact moment the quarterback competition stopped being a competition and became a coronation. And the exact moment one quarterback realized he was losing more than reps. He was losing the team. What happened on the practice field was dramatic, but what happened after practice was far more revealing. If the on-field collapse marked the moment the quarterback battle shifted, the locker room and coaching fallout marked the moment the organization had to confront that shift. Every hallway whisper, every coaches-only meeting, every player interaction in the aftermath painted a clearer picture. The hierarchy had quietly, but unmistakably, changed. The locker room felt different the moment players walked in. Normally, after a competitive practice, energy is scattered, some players joking, some decompressing, some replaying moments on tablets. But this time, the mood was quiet, almost cautious. Everyone knew what they had just witnessed could alter the team's direction, and nobody wanted to be too obvious about where they stood. Still, the subconscious behavior spoke volumes. Veteran receivers drifted toward Sanders' locker without even thinking, not in a dramatic, performative way, but in a way that showed who they naturally gravitated toward for answers, for leadership, for connection. They asked questions about timing and looks they wanted to try the next day. They spoke with casual confidence around him, the kind players show when they believe the quarterback in front of them can actually elevate their careers. Meanwhile, Gabriel dressed in near silence. Even teammates who usually sat beside him were quieter than normal, not out of disrespect, but out of uncertainty. Nobody knew the appropriate tone. Support him too loudly, and you risk aligning against the shift. Ignore him entirely, and it becomes cruel. That awkward middle space is where the tension lived, thick and uncomfortable. Some players offered him guarded encouragement, pats on the shoulder pads, quick acknowledgments. But they felt forced. Small gestures meant more for courtesy than genuine belief. The coaches felt it too. Before the locker room even settled, offensive staff members were already huddling in a side room deep inside the building. Not arguing, not yelling, just analyzing with the kind of worried intensity that only comes when every pre-camp plan suddenly feels outdated. They had spent months preparing for a long, structured developmental competition between two young quarterbacks. Now they were faced with a performance gap too dramatic to ignore. Kevin Stefanski entered last, and the room quieted instantly. He didn't slam papers or raise his voice. Instead, he asked the question everyone had been avoiding all afternoon. Do we still have a competition? Silence. Because the truth wasn't about reps or depth charts anymore. It was about trust, and trust had shifted decisively toward Sanders. Coaches tried to rationalize Gabriel's struggles, a tough practice, too much pressure, a bad stretch. But each explanation dissolved the moment they compared it against Sanders' composure, command, and consistency. The situation became even more complicated when front office personnel joined the discussion. Draft capital, developmental timelines, organizational philosophy, everything collided. Nobody wanted to admit they were witnessing a changing of the guard in week 2 of camp, but everybody knew it. Back in the locker room, as players filed out for meetings, Sanders walked with a calm confidence. Not arrogant, not boastful, just grounded. Gabriel trailed behind, eyes forward but clearly weighed down. 2 quarterbacks, 2 trajectories, and a team suddenly adjusting to a reality it wasn't prepared for. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was quiet, heavy, and transformative, the kind that changes a franchise from the inside out. If the locker room felt the shift, the front office felt the panic. What unfolded on the practice field didn't just complicate a quarterback competition. It threatened years of planning, draft strategy, and internal politics. For the people upstairs, this wasn't a good story or a breakthrough moment. It was a crisis. The first wave of concern hit the player personnel department. These were the evaluators who pushed for Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, who defended him in draft meetings, who vouched for his readiness and long-term upside. They weren't worried about one bad practice. They were worried about what the practice symbolized, because every organization can excuse a rough afternoon. What they cannot excuse is a complete collapse while the player drafted after him looks like a franchise cornerstone. Some staffers immediately started revisiting their scouting reports, quietly asking themselves if they missed something. Others blamed the pressure, the spotlight, the unintended comparison with Sanders. But none of it softened the reality. Their investment looked shaky, and their credibility was suddenly in play. Meanwhile, the analytics group tried to frame the situation through numbers: college performance, practice grading data, historical development curves. But those spreadsheets couldn't capture what was unfolding in real time. The way the offense moved differently with Sanders, the way players aligned behind him, the way the coaches responded without even knowing they were responding. The front office loves data, but even they knew when the numbers become irrelevant to what the entire building feels. Where panic turned into real fear was in the executive offices. The general manager now faced an uncomfortable question. If the locker room has chosen a quarterback, do you fight it or follow it? Draft capital says you fight it. The building's energy says you follow it. Ownership says you trust what they already believed all along. And that's where things became especially messy. Ownership had championed Sanders from the moment his name entered draft conversations. Not because of hype, but because they saw rare leadership traits and presence, the qualities that don't always show up on film but define the great ones. Now, with Sanders dominating early in camp, every front office member who opposed that pick suddenly felt exposed. One executive even joked privately, "We have a quarterback controversy, and only one quarterback is causing it." Behind closed doors, meetings grew tense. The GM questioned whether the staff had prepped Gabriel properly. Scouts argued that the pressure was unfair. Coaches insisted they didn't design reps to favor anyone. But beneath the words was the unspoken truth. Everything happening right now validated the owner's instincts and undermined the front office's planning. Gabriel's agent added another layer of stress. According to people close to the situation, he began quietly exploring whether a trade might be possible if Gabriel didn't get a fair chance to compete. Not a demand, just early feelers. But even that sent shockwaves. When an agent starts looking outward, the team has already lost control of the narrative. By the end of the day, executives found themselves staring at a scenario they never expected this early. What if the fifth-round quarterback they viewed as a developmental gamble had already overtaken the third-round player they viewed as the future? Panic wasn't just growing, it was justified. And with each unanswered question, one truth became clearer. The organization wasn't steering the quarterback competition anymore. The quarterback competition was steering the organization. While the Browns were scrambling internally, the rest of the league wasn't just watching, they were reacting. What happened during that Wednesday practice didn't stay contained inside the fences of a training facility. Word travels fast in the NFL, especially when a young quarterback suddenly looks like he's rewriting a team's entire depth chart before preseason even begins. By the next morning, people around the league were already texting insiders the same question. Is this real? Because teams know what a manufactured storyline looks like. They know when a franchise is trying to hype a rookie or create competition to motivate a veteran. But this didn't smell like PR spin or camp exaggeration. The details were too consistent, too specific, and too alarming for opposing front offices to ignore. Executives from multiple teams reportedly reached out to their scouts, who attended Browns practices earlier in the week. The answer they got only confirmed their suspicions. Sanders wasn't just having a good camp. He was taking over the offense with a command that rookies his age almost never show. And more importantly, he was doing it while the quarterback drafted ahead of him was unraveling under the pressure. Coaches from other organizations began discussing the situation in hushed tones. They knew what it meant when a locker room shifted this early. They knew the patterns, how players respond when they sense one quarterback can win games and the other is still trying to survive practice reps. And they knew what it looks like when a coaching staff realizes their preseason plans are suddenly irrelevant. Some teams wondered whether Cleveland might be forced into a quarterback trade before Week 1. Not because they wanted Gabriel specifically, but because they recognized a classic NFL truth. When a franchise's internal hierarchy collapses, someone usually becomes available. Analysts jumped on the story too. NFL Network insiders framed it as the most dramatic early camp shift we've seen in years. ESPN segments debated how quickly the Browns should respond. Even rival AFC North commentators, who rarely praise Cleveland, admitted something unusual was unfolding. They weren't focusing on the drama, they were focusing on the implications. Because if Sanders really had it, then the entire divisional outlook could change. But the most telling reaction came from former players, quarterbacks who understand the pressure better than anyone. Many of them quietly acknowledged that when teammates start drifting toward one quarterback instead of the other, the battle is already over. You don't coach that shift. You don't script it. It happens naturally, and when it does, the organization has no choice but to follow the energy. By the end of the week, the people who study league dynamics for a living understood the new reality. Cleveland wasn't just dealing with a temporary quarterback controversy. They were watching the emergence of a new leader, one who carried himself like he belonged long before the playbook was even mastered. The rest of the league had taken notice. The narrative had already shifted. The quarterback room wasn't the same, the organizational plans weren't the same, and expectations for the season weren't the same. A new reality had formed, and whether Cleveland was ready or not, everyone else knew exactly what it meant. The Browns suddenly didn't have a quarterback competition. They had a franchise quarterback emerging in real time. By the time the sun started to set on that Wednesday afternoon, everyone inside the Browns organization understood one thing. They had just witnessed a moment they would be talking about for years. Not a highlight, not a lucky stretch. A pivot point, the kind of day that becomes part of a franchise's mythology. Every team experiences turning points, but most of them arrive slowly, after months of evaluation and cautious optimism. This one happened in a single practice. A 2-hour window where everything the Browns thought they knew about their quarterback room flipped upside down. It wasn't dramatic because someone said something shocking or because a coach made a bold declaration. It was dramatic because the truth revealed itself on its own. Sanders didn't win the locker room through speeches or personality. He won it through presence, through execution, through poise that didn't match his age or his round of selection. And while the organization tried to hide behind silence, tried to downplay the sudden shift, the players made it impossible. They reacted in real time, without filter or caution, gravitating toward the quarterback they trusted. And that's what makes this day so defining. It showed Cleveland something they've been searching for across countless seasons, countless regimes, countless near misses: clarity. For once, the answer wasn't tangled in debate or analytics or development plans. It was right there on the field, unfolding across every rep, every drill, every subtle moment where one quarterback elevated a team and the other struggled to stay afloat. The front office felt it too. They didn't want to. This wasn't the timeline they mapped out. This wasn't the narrative they expected. But even in the quietest meeting rooms, the conversations all circled back to the same realization. Plans can be rewritten, but momentum cannot. And Sanders had momentum that no chart, no draft grade, no preseason depth chart could contain. For Gabriel, the day was painful in ways only he truly understands. Quarterback competitions aren't supposed to end this suddenly. They're supposed to take weeks, months, even years. But sometimes, the game doesn't wait for circumstances to catch up. Sometimes one performance becomes the story. And sometimes a single practice forces an entire franchise to confront truths it wasn't ready for. The league noticed. Reporters noticed. Even rival teams noticed. But the most important observers were the people wearing the same uniform. They understood the shift before anyone said a word publicly. They saw a quarterback who commanded respect without demanding it, who ran the offense with a rhythm they could feel, who made the entire structure around him operate cleaner, faster, sharper. And that's why this day matters. It wasn't about draft picks. It wasn't about hype. It wasn't about expectations. It was about a team watching its future walk onto the field and take control without hesitation. Years from now, when people talk about the moment Cleveland finally found its direction at quarterback, they won't point to a game-winning drive or a breakout regular season performance. They'll point to this practice, the day a franchise pivoted, the day the hierarchy shifted, the day Sanders didn't just compete. He arrived. 0.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.